Regulatory change, financial crime, data protection, new technology and third-party risk are all issues that are affecting compliance professionals today. We went to find out more and look ahead to the next decade.
I'm delighted to say I'm now joined by Tom Cardamone, who's the President and CEO of Global Financial Integrity. Tom, many thanks for joining us today. Which participants now in the global financial framework really need to rethink their approach, not just to detecting, but also to deterring financial crime in the next decade or so?
I think all the participants can do better. We've seen in the past that money laundering is only getting to be a more severe problem. So financial institutions, I think, can do a better job of using the information they're getting from their customers, identifying who the bad actors may be, and providing that to the government agencies that oversee that process. The governments themselves can get better as well in how they use that information and distribute it among the law enforcement personnel that try to fix this problem.
How might everybody work together to achieve this?
I think the word together in the question is the key. Within institutions, within banks, the fraud staff need to talk to the money laundering staff, who needs to talk to the know your customer staff. Within governments, the financial intelligence units need to talk to law enforcement more often. And then those institutions, the financial institutions and the governments, need to cooperate more. And then, of course, this is an international problem. So governments need to talk to other governments to try to attack the problem.
How would you say the concept of integrity has evolved over the last 10 years, and what can you see changing in the years to come?
I don't know that the concept has changed. I think what has changed is the understanding of the severity of the problem. For the last 5, 6, 7 years, we've seen one financial scandal after another. People are really beginning to understand that this is a massive problem, $2 trillion a year problem, perhaps, that affects whole swaths of people's lives. This is not just a criminal problem. This gets to inequality in a whole host of areas. And I think what has changed is the understanding that there has to be more integrity in the global financial system.
Given the pace of evolution, what role would you say technology is going to play in helping us to achieve this?
It's critically important. Machine learning, artificial intelligence, distributed ledger technology, blockchain is usually the word that some people know, even if they don't understand the concept. These types of technologies are going to be critically important just because of the massive amounts of information that financial institutions and governments are dealing with on a daily basis. That technology is going to help any institution to address financial crime in a more sustainable way.
In your view, Tom, what would you say are some of the biggest challenges now facing compliance professionals in the next decade or so?
I think it's the pace of the information that's coming into these institutions. They're being inundated with information. In the United States, suspicious activity reports that are filed by financial institutions to the government, there's over 2 million a year. And the staff in the government agency isn't nearly big enough to deal with it. So how do you deal with that without hiring massive amounts of people? You use technology to attack the problem.
Okay, Tom Cardamone, many thanks for joining us today. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Well, I'm joined now by Neil Walsh, the United Nations Chief of Cybercrime, Anti-Money Laundering and Counter-Financing of Terrorism Department. Mr. Walsh, thank you very much for joining us today. How is criminal activity evolving, and is that change being driven by changing technology?
Very much so, Jonathan, and thanks very much for the opportunity to speak with you. In fact, we've seen the criminality change remarkably during COVID lockdown. As people have been principally back at home, I am back at home again in Vienna because our numbers are increasing. People are taking more risks online, often because they're in an environment where they're more comfortable. And criminals are the same. They have anticipated opportunities. We have seen criminals on dark web marketplaces, so the encrypted part of the internet, where traditional criminals have been asking for advice from cyber criminals. How can they make the biggest opportunities, both financially and through commodities of lockdown? Where are people more vulnerable, and how do they make the most money from it?
COVID, as you say, has changed so many aspects of our lives. We're interacting and we're transacting much more online. Is that something that criminals have been able to exploit?
Yeah, absolutely. We have seen a significant growth in online cybercrime since lockdown occurred around the world. That has presented in ways that we could predict, and we did accurately, unfortunately, predict this back in March, where criminality would increase around the world online because of the opportunities presented by having many more people online throughout the day. We have seen a change in criminal behavior, in offending behavior, in trying to socially engineer people to do things that they wouldn't ordinarily do online. We've seen a growth in child sexual exploitation material online by hundreds of percent. We have seen fake cures, fake vaccines for COVID being sold right back as early as March. And we can accurately predict as vaccines, genuine vaccines, start to come online, that marketplace will grow exponentially.
So how quick are the regulators and law enforcement agencies adapting to that changing behaviour?
It's a great question, and it is exceptionally challenging for law enforcement. In fact, we see a perfect storm of criminality arriving because some of the specialist skill set encountering cybercrime and financial crime has been lost because of COVID. We've seen cops and prosecutors and judges get ill around the world and be removed from their duties. We've seen specialist investigators be removed from their duties and put into quarantine enforcement activity. So you see the criminality piece rising. You see the specialism in investigating it dropping off. You see a certain lack of awareness from the public, and the people that win out of that are the criminals.
How much of a headache is that for compliance professionals?
So I think there is always the temptation that we exist within our own social boundaries, that we know our own organizations, we know our own businesses, and we're comfortable within that. And if you think way back to the September 11th attacks 19 years ago, there was a rather famous or infamous speech from the then Secretary of Defense of the US, Donald Rumsfeld, about known knowns and unknown knowns. And that's very much the land that we're living in right now, where we can anticipate some of the threat, where we know what we're comfortable with, what we can see in front of us. But what compliance professionals, and I think law enforcers generally, have to become comfortable with is being uncomfortable. You have to become comfortable with not knowing everything about the threat landscape that you're addressing. There are some technical solutions, there are also technical threats, but so much of the solution overall is human. It's recognizing that threats evolve, threats change, and recognizing that criminals are looking for opportunities the same way that business does. So as things moved online and remain online and will probably remain online for many, many months still to come, criminals are looking for those opportunities as well. So if you're a compliance officer, a compliance professional, a senior manager, you have to be anticipating, what is my broad risk in this organization? Start thinking like a criminal in many ways. If you were trying to infiltrate, trying to compromise, trying to make money from crime, targeting your organization, how would you do it? And when you come up with those answers, then you start to look at your own defenses. Are they in the right place? Can you anticipate and mitigate that risk? And if you can't, what are you going to do about it?
Neil Walsh, thank you very much.
Thank you.